This video is brought to you by Squarespace. I remember a time not even that long ago where, given the nature of the types of things that I make on this channel, I would get asked in my comments all the time, do you play D&D? What kind of character do you play in D&D? I had never even played. Knew almost nothing about it, didn't grow up with it. I had just unintentionally made a lot of D&D characters over the years, but I am happy to report that over the last couple of years, I have been playing D&D. It's about time, isn't it? I've played 2 full campaigns at this point, and I have really been leaning into a typecast for myself. The first character I played was an eccentric half-elf bard named Jasper, and the second character I played was an eccentric tabaxi bard named Simone. I've had such a fun time playing those types of characters. I definitely tend to gravitate towards high charisma characters that are in that like glass cannon territory, because I'm really just there for the giggles of it all most of the time. Given my playstyle during the last campaign, one of my main questions for my DM was, can I just like blow it up? Can I explode something? I would really like to do some pyrotechnics in this campaign here today. Which of course the answer was no, you cannot do that. You are a tabaxi bard. That has nothing to do with your character. If you want to do that in the next campaign, you're gonna have to play as like an artificer or something. And I said, you know what? Okay. I will play as an artificer in the next campaign just so I can blow things up. So today, friends, I want to design my next D&D character. I had a couple of things on my wish list for the next character that I was going to play in D&D. One of them, yes, I want to be able to blow things up, which apparently the artificer class is the best way to be able to do that. Number 2, I want to play as a vampire, because of course I did. Of course, at some point, I'm gonna be like, hey, could I be a vampire, please? Apparently, the compatible way to do that in our campaign is a dampier. I think that's how you say that, but I'm not entirely sure. But they're like vampires, but a little bit different. I'll take it. The other thing I, of course, needed to figure out was what kind of species do I want to be this time? Because I do like playing as the weird little guys. I really enjoyed playing as a tabaxi. I eventually just turned everything into meow meow cat. This time I decided I wanted to play as a tiefling in order to make my little guy as cursed as humanly possible. Now, the last thing that I really had to decide for him right now was on some kind of background, which hasn't really played a huge role in my characters in the past, and I kind of wanted to change that. So, perusing the background options list for the D&D characters, I stumbled across one called Haunted One. And I said, hello, what is that? Which apparently is just, your character has a built-in emo tragic backstory that haunts them into the present. And I said, I guess I can make my character a little bit emo. Whoops! Given what I've set up for my little guy so far, I didn't want him to be so far into emo territory that he's no longer fun to play, because I mainly like playing zany, stupid comic relief characters. So I decided that I wanted the Fates to give him just like the darkest, most emo, most sad boy life setup possible. But then to balance that out, the Fates decided to give him the combined personality of Shaggy, Milo Thatch, and the other guy from Atlantis The Lost Empire that likes to blow things up.
It must have taken thousands of years to carve this thing.
Hey, look, I made a bridge.
So with all that in mind, let's look at my visual inspiration for my character so far. Time to get serious. So on my board so far, I have 233 pins. The main challenge here is I have to convincingly combine all of his little disparate character elements into a design that feels cohesive, good welding of like emo tiefling boy and nerdy tinkering artificer boy. I have a bunch of different inspiration of just cool tiefling character designs. I also have a couple of like steampunk vibes, nerdy scientist dude. I also have a lot of inspiration on here for like different horn shapes. It's also important to note that I have decided that his lineage is going to be an Asmodeus tiefling, which is like, kind of chose him because he's apparently like the lord of the 9 hells. I figured I would just go pretty hard with his infernal lineage. I of course also have some Shaggies, some Klaus. I also have a bunch of pictures of Dobermans. I love to have a little animal companion, and apparently whenever you play as an artificer, you can have like a little cannon companion that assists you in battle that you can like attack with and have like basically an extra action. This cannon can also apparently have legs, and it can be a quadruped. I'm going to try to design dog cannon. I just have to share this with you. No commentary, no notes. Anyways, Anyways, in here I of course also have a ton of inspiration for different steampunk gear, artificer tools, mechanical systems that he might use to like forge some of his weapons, inspiration for different grenades and bombs that he might use. And you might be wondering, why do you have pictures of spines in here? Well, apparently as a damn tier, your character can thirst for various types of human meat and flesh. There's a D&D roll table for what kind of human meat and or flesh that your character thirsts for. And of course, when I rolled, I got the most disgusting one. Cerebral spinal fluid. I got some spines as inspiration visuals. For the top here, I mostly have just more character design inspirations for artificers and tinkerer characters in general, and references for tools, explosives, that sort of thing. For some reason, my first step in designing characters like this is usually to just sketch around and figure out what their face might look like. For some reason, that plays a lot into their energy and characterization. I feel like it's a very intimate way to explore a character. Like you can stare directly into their eyes. And while we were filling out our stat sheets the other night during our session, I already did that.
These first few sketches of Azarius are pretty simple because like I said, I was doing these during a D&D prep session. And yes, the name I decided on for my character is Azarius. But my goal here was really to just nail down a general energy and vibe for the character. Whenever I imagine things in my head, I just get these like blurry glimpses of the energy I want a character to have. The general attitude and demeanor. And working on the face of a character first can really help me to narrow that down a bit because it is so focused. I can kind of bring every aspect of the personality and the shape language and the character's general demeanor into their face. It also kind of helps me to avoid same face syndrome and stuff like that. So even though conventional wisdom usually says start with full body thumbnails and then get detailed as you go, I usually do rough sketches of the face first and then expand out to rough sketches of a full body thumbnail, which is also another thing that I did in this little design session.
So as usual, my first step of a character design process like this is to do a little bit of shape exploration. This is mostly to explore the themes of the character a little bit, figure out areas where I can intertwine things, just generally use shape language to subliminally strengthen the character design overall.
For Azarius, that meant collecting a bunch of important key visuals onto one canvas and kind of annotating it and sketching over it to figure out if I can find any connections, consistent shapes, different shapes and visual elements that I want to bring into his design in a prominent way. So here I immediately started drawing connections between the ram horns that are going to serve as some of the main inspiration for his horns and the weapon I decided on him, which is a sickle. There's a lot of these crescent, half circle shapes present throughout his design. I also saw visual connections between the goggles that he's going to wear, little potion bottles he'll probably have, as well as some of the grenades he's going to use, which all feature circles or spheres as a prominent shape. I tend to give a lot of my characters some kind of key shape to base a lot of their shape language on. Usually that tends to get very specific, even down to like designing that shape itself. And for Azarius, I basically decided on a crescent shape, an incomplete circle that is sharp on the edges. It's always cool to see how metaphorical shape language can be for a character's literal personality or the point of them or whatever, because I imagine Azarius to be a person who really wanted to form into a softer, gentler soul, but he's just left with these sharp edges that he can't help. He has like a literal piece of him missing. Anyways, moving on from the emo stuff, something else I highlighted here was the facial structure of a ram, because for some reason I like to take inspiration for my characters like facial proportions and structure from animals. I find that it's just a really interesting way to get unique but still pleasing facial proportions, so I've ended up using it a lot in my character designs. His face shape at different angles was initially something I was really struggling with, so simplifying it here really helped me to visualize that a lot more. And similarly, I also took inspiration for his build and general lankiness from that of a Doberman. I'm also trying to work some domesticated dog symbolism into his character because he's trying to be like good boy, man's best friend, but he comes across more as scary dog, which, as many of us know, most of the scary dog archetypes out there are just good boys in disguise. Finally, something that I wanted to bring out in his clothing design specifically was sort of those spine shapes, or at least the articulation of a spine, having pieces like armor pieces, for example, that are articulated in that way. And I also wanted to just bring a general asymmetry into his design because I feel like that fits his off-kilter, incongruent personality really well.
So with my general shape exploration out of the way, let's start working on the actual character design. But first, I need a place for all of the little OCs that I design and then immediately abandon to live, which is why I host my portfolio with this video's sponsor, Squarespace. My favorite thing about Squarespace is the customization. You can get started on your site by choosing from dozens of flexible website templates that you can customize with your choice of text colors and brand and graphics. And from there, you can choose from a ton of different customizable page templates to create brand relevant website pages and content. And this is where many of my less abandoned OCs currently live. I've been able to easily make character profiles for my OCs that I can detail and expand with lots of text and various relevant media thanks to their drag and drop website builder fluid engine. And keeping my main portfolio gallery updated is just as easy because I can upload new pieces with the click of a button, and then Squarespace will arrange my unused abandoned characters for me. But Squarespace also has a ton of website and commerce tools to help you grow your brand, like SEO tools to help you show up more often in search engines to the right audience, and extensive website analytics so you can keep track of traffic, engagement, and see what's working with your audience. They also have an e-commerce platform that can be linked directly to your site, which is perfect for artists like me who also sell prints of our work. And for the busy artists, they also have custom merch, which produces your products through a print-on-demand service that handles inventory, production, and shipping for you. So if you're in the market for a website or portfolio, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/pricklyalpaca to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks as always to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to it.
Getting to the actual reference sheet here, there were a ton of things that I ended up wanting to design for Azarius in terms of visual appearance and especially like different phases of outfits, because he has a couple of different like evolutions that I know he goes through, especially near like the beginning side of the campaign. At the time of recording this, I actually played my first session as Azarius last night, which was a lot of fun. I had a blast, but I'm still very much trying to like develop him as a character and figure out exactly what, like how I want to play him, especially in terms of his mannerisms, his voice. If you're wondering why I'm going to so much trouble to design a D&D character that you don't really see their appearance is not like the most necessary, that's partially why. I feel like it helps me to get to know him, get inside his head, and figure out exactly how I want to play him, which I think makes the experience a lot more fun. And also, I am just me. I love making characters, and I love making especially convoluted reference sheets. So to start out this reference sheet, I was really just trying to nail down his general default outfits, his more like casual side of his aesthetic, what he would wear whenever he doesn't have armor on or other gear and that sort of thing. And I was also especially trying to nail down his color palette. I had a couple of very loose color palettes in my mind at first. I knew I wanted to give him like intense flaming red hair because of course I did, but the other thing that is common for tieflings is having some kind of unnatural skin tone that doesn't occur in human beings. Their skin can be red, it can be gray, blue, and given the fact that I wanted to give him kind of like an orangey flaming hairstyle, I thought to complement that, a purple skin tone would be an interesting fit. So since I usually involve close-ups and headshots in my reference sheets, and I was already pretty pleased with the ones I had done in my sketchbooks, I kind of just pasted those in and started inking those to include as part of the reference sheet. And I also started coloring and rendering those out to see if my purple skin tone theory would work in practice. I wasn't entirely sure how complementary it would look with the hair since I would have tones of red and orange, but after messing around with the skin tone a little bit and adding like little undertones of blues, some more warm tones around the eyes and that sort of thing, I also had a little bit of a challenge figuring out what color I wanted to make his eyes and his horns, because tieflings also tend to have just like a solid eye color. I think technically sometimes they don't even have pupils, but I did give Azarius pupils, and I also ended up giving him yellow eyes to complement his hair and give him just like a little bit more of a sickly appearance. And after a little bit of experimentation, I gave his horns a gradient of purple and orange. For his main general outfits, I did have a pretty decent sense of direction before going into this. I knew that I didn't want them to be too complicated, mostly for ease of drawing them over and over again, because I tend to do that to myself. I figured I am going to have more complex variations of his outfits in this rough sheet, so let's keep it simple sometimes. So based on some of the sketches I had already done, I wanted to give him just a basic beige button-up type shirt. I paired that with some baggy cargo pants, and I also wanted to give him a sense that he's like repaired these over again and kind of done some modifications of his own. So I gave the pants some patches and I added some lacing to the shirt. I paired that with some work gloves, a corset style belt, and a harness system to strap on any gear that he might potentially need. I also gave him some bandages to keep his pants in place, and some Jinx style steampunk inspired boots, because Jinx is also a bit of a character inspiration for Azarius. For his even more casual version of this outfit, I literally just gave him beige tank top and some similar cargo style pants but with more pockets, the same boots, and then some suspenders for if he decides to put a shirt on. This outfit was also a good opportunity for me to display the extensive scarring that he has on his left arm and generally left side of his face. One of my character traits for Azarius is because he's sort of a sad boy, he does not have the best sense of self-preservation, and I think that also just plays into his chaotic personality in general, but he is not always the most safe whenever he's doing his tinkering or engaging in battle, and he is especially not always that safe around fire because as a tiefling he does possess a level of fire resistance, but I'm thinking at some point in his backstory he's tinkering with bombs or he's working on some kind of project and he's not careful enough, and bro kind of just blows himself up a little bit, which of course leaves extensive cool emo boy scarring on the left side of his body. The next outfits that I needed to design for my boy after this were his light-studded leather armor, which I believe is something that he gets as a part of his artificer class, and then of course his extensive work gear that he would need as an artificer, welding gear, chemical PPE, lots of tools. I wanted to design a really overcomplicated outfit for him to wear whenever he's doing his more serious tinkering and building. For his light armor, I wanted to just design some cool, shapy leather armor for him, something that, like I said earlier, is a little bit more asymmetrical, has that spine-like articulation to it, but at the same time also isn't too overwhelmingly armored. I decided to go for a pretty standard-looking leather armor set because at this point in the story he probably wouldn't have like a lot of money to be able to purchase like really nice leather armor. He just needs something that's going to be functional, but of course I'm also gonna try to make it look as cool as I possibly can. The main features of this armor are the articulation and the asymmetry. I want to give him pauldrons that kind of mirror that spine shape influence with a bigger pauldron on one side, and I wanted to carry that asymmetry into the lower body by giving him a little bit more thigh armor on his like attack arm side and a little bit more bag room on the other side. And yes, that also means that Azarius is left-handed. I also gave him a little bit of a green half cloak on this design just to add a little bit of flamboyance and flair. And on this design you can also see me adding in his sickle, which has like a pretty simplistic design that I'm going to expand on a little bit more in just a couple of minutes here. And I also did the first concept for his spine spear, which is something that I think I'm still playing with a little bit. I'm still not all that great at simplifying the shapes in a spine to be able to draw this in a way that I think looks good, but at least the basic concept is out there. I'll probably expand on this a little bit later. For his tinkering gear, I wanted him to be very much fully covered head to toe because his tinkering gear is also going to include like welding gear and stuff like that. Dangerous chemicals, more very hot fire. Maybe he'll finally learn his lesson so he doesn't burn his entire body. So my idea for this is that he basically has his base clothing layer on underneath all of this, and then on top of that I added a thick leather welding apron, complete with lots of tools in the pockets, storage for anything that he would need to access really quickly. That is belted with some additional pouches around his waist. I also gave him thick welding gloves on his arms just to try to cover as much of that as humanly possible, once again trying to learn from his mistakes. And then on top of all of that is another thick, very long welding cloak, also made of tough protective leather, something that's going to cover his shoulders, his legs, and also has a high collar so that it protects the neck area. I also tried to bring in a little bit more of that spine motif on the shoulders of his little welding cloak, just something that would be mostly a decorative personality type element that he would add in because he likes to modify his own clothing. However, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out how to visually simplify the vertebrae in a spine in a way that I like, and I don't super love the way it looks, but you get the idea. Moving on from the base clothing, I wanted to add lots of gear onto this design because that's kind of the point of it. I wanted to add a giant backpack that could include any tools, canisters of fuel, chemicals. He probably has some magical potions in there that he uses to imbue items with magical properties. And I of course also wanted to include a giant canister of fuel on his back, along with a welding torch for him and some like metalworking tools, because I imagine that's probably the main material that he tinkers with. That's probably the main way that he's able to assemble things and craft larger mechanical objects, so I wanted that to be a big element of his design. And to go along with that, I was going to design a welding mask for him. Unfortunately, I forgot to do that, but I did end up designing a gas mask for him along with some goggles for use use with like dangerous chemicals, metal scraps. Just, it's a good idea to have protection from that sort of thing. But I didn't want it to just be like a normal looking gas mask. I took inspiration from a couple of cool different gas masks that I found on Pinterest, and I wanted to give it a very vampiric, dead, ghoulish appearance, so I gave it sort of a skeletal motif going on, and also gave it some fangs around the filters. I also gave him red goggles with different lenses inspired by some of the goggles that I had on my Pinterest. Red glasses, red goggles, red eyes are just sort of a motif for him. It's almost a bit of foreshadowing, as I will get to later. Once I was finished with his tinkering gear, I decided to go and add some detailed views of all of his weapons. I was able to choose a couple of different basic weapons as part of the artificer class, and I chose a sickle, a spear, and a light crossbow, and I also added just like a very basic dagger on here. Just something that I thought that he would probably carry around with him, just in case. Now, I was feeling a little bit lazy whenever I drew this, so I kind of just copy-pasted the weapons that I had already drawn for his like armor form whenever I was working on this and added a little bit more detail. So for his sickles, yes, plural, because in my version of the character, he definitely dual wields these. I also added a little bit of a flame motif on the detailed version. Azarius likes to personalize his clothing, so I figured maybe he etched this into the blade at some point. And I'm thinking at some point he is also able to imbue both of these with some kind of flame glyph. Maybe there's some kind of magical process going on to the chemical flame etching that he added, I don't know. I also added a more detailed view of the spine spear. Once again, copy-pasted. Once again, I'm a little iffy on the design overall. It's probably something I'm going to continue to work on. However, I did try to put slightly more effort into the design of the light crossbow. I am not particularly skilled at designing weapons like this. I found just drawing it to be tremendously obnoxious. I did just generally try to make the aesthetic align with his existing sense of taste, since again, he would have the ability to personalize his weapons like this, add little carvings, forge things to make it look cooler, function better, stuff like that. And once again, I do think he would use this with flaming arrows. Finally, last but not least, I needed to design a vampire look for him to establish whenever he enters his Dampier era. And I have so many variations of clothing designs before then because apparently he's going to be turned into a Dampier somewhere in the campaign that I don't know about. I am not privy to that information. It could happen pretty far into the campaign as far as I know, but I do want him to have a slight personality shift, taste shift whenever he is turned. And I kind of want that to be represented in a bit of a visual change in his taste, kind of him skewing towards darker colors, less saturated things, just making him look even more visually emo and visually dead than he already looked. And this will also, of course, take root in his personality, which is something I haven't exactly decided on yet. But the general silhouette of his outfit here is not all that different from his like tinkering gear. It's just a little bit more vampirified. He's got a black dress shirt instead of a beige one. I gave him a little sharp corset to have on. He still has a big long welding jacket on, but I gave him a capelet on it, and it's now black with red lining and a popped collar. I gave him a scarf to cover up a potential bite. I don't know if that's exactly how he's going to be made into a Dampier, but it seems likely. And I also gave him really tall, dramatic lace-up boots with some teeth on them, because I do not think Azarius is a subtle man. Finally, I wanted to give him some subtle physical changes, so I actually changed his eye color to a little bit more of a bloody orange rather than a yellow, almost like some kind of bloodlust or lust for flesh has taken over him. And since he already had fangs before as a tiefling, as a Dampier, I made them just a little bit longer. Finally, to touch on some personality and backstory stuff, because I didn't know where else to put this in the video, a lot of things for him are still very much open-ended. I'm kind of playing him as the story progresses because I have to figure out so much of his characterization and backstory based on what our DM decides to do. But for his backstory, I do have a couple of things established. I know for his Haunted One background, based on a roll table that I ended up doing, the thing that haunts him is the fact that he was born under a dark star, and that has in some way cursed him, causing him to hear voices at night. So hearing voices voices and having this general hauntedness is something that I've already brought into his character as I've played him for the first time. I also know that his parents are unfortunately no longer with us. That's something that I said in the first campaign. And I also know that he didn't have any kind of formal education because I mentioned that he didn't go to school. Yep, that was like mostly a joke, but I decided I'm gonna just like stick with it and commit to the things that I have already said in the campaign. In terms of personality, like I said, he is a little bit of a sad emo boy. He is very haunted. He just has this like weight about him, and he almost seems older than he actually is because of just his general exhaustion, his disregard for self-care. He is also very stoned most of the time because that is something that actually helps to quiet the voices a little bit, which thankfully does chill and mellow him out a little bit, allowing the lighter, more golden retriever adjacent parts of his personality to come through. So far in the campaign, I've been playing him as very chill kind of dude bro who just doesn't really know what's going on most of the time. I think given his overall tiefling appearance and lineage and the fact that sometimes he's going crazy hearing voices, he does tend to attract some unwanted attention here and there. I know in D&D a lot of times there is prejudice against tieflings, but also as part of his Haunted One background, apparently sometimes people are very eager to help you as long as they don't think that you're going to hurt them or anything. So I think he does attract people who are wanting to make friends with him somewhat easily, but he's very standoffish. But given his whole canine link and inspiration, I think once he is finally able to make a friend that he trusts, I think he would be incredibly loyal, really down to just finally have a good time for once. I also think that he is very food driven in personality, once again leaning on that dog inspiration a little bit. So I might bring like a desire to learn how to cook into his character later on once he's able to establish some friends and good connections. Right now in our campaign, my brother is actually playing a character that just desperately is in need of a friend and validation, and I see some very good potential for wholesome friendship developing between him and Azarius. I wish I could give a little bit more information on personality and background, but some of this is just going to have to develop as we play the campaign, so maybe at some point during the process of playing, I will make another video. Maybe I'll do another design video once he's been turned into a Dampier and update you guys on some of those things.
Okay, at this point, my design for Azarius himself is pretty much done, and I'm really pleased with how it's coming out. The only challenge at this point is trying to figure out how to reliably draw him over and over again, because I made him pretty complicated. He has a pretty specific look overall. But now it is time to circle back to something that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I want to design a little canine companion for him. And am I going to also make it something that is going to be really difficult for me to draw over and over again? Most likely yes, but let's do it.
Like I said, the premise of this little guy is robot Doberman cannon, and you can choose what kind of like artillery you want your cannon to be. Your options are flamethrower, force ballista, or protector, which is more of like a healing companion. But of course, for my purposes, I decided to go with flamethrower, so I do want this Roberman, as I'm calling him, to be able to shoot flames out of his mouth, because that is just neat. You know? Unfortunately, with this design, I am coming up against what is probably my biggest character design weakness, and that is anything mechanical. I'm not good at drawing mechs, I am not good at drawing robots, and that's exactly what this little guy basically is. So in order to make him work well, and in order to have anything going for me here, I needed a way to translate the body of a Doberman into a robot and do it in a way that's convincing, and in a way that doesn't have too many abstract looking mechanical shapes. For this, I really did want to come up with something that first and foremost does look like a dog, even though it's a robot, because I just think that that's more fun for a character design like this, and also easier for me to draw in general because I am pretty good with canine anatomy, so I can kind of translate those two things and like meet them in the middle somehow. So based on my strengths here, I decided to base the component robot parts on basically the musculature of dog anatomy. I also wanted to throw a couple of skeletal elements in there, once again to call back to the use of spines in Azarius's design. So for the most part, I got canine muscle group reference, and I tried to just pick apart shapes and figure out, okay, this is a section of mechanical parts grouped together, this is a section of mechanical parts. They're going to articulate in some way. I don't exactly have to come up with that, I just have to make it look kind of convincing. So for the face, I mainly translated the face of a Doberman pretty straight up. I also ended up drawing some diagrams that show how the jaw opens and how the fire comes out and everything, and some of like the ventilation system, but for the most part it is a Doberman face where the jaw is able to unhinge. Working my way down for the neck area and the front of the body and kind of upper body, that's where I took most of the inspiration from canine musculature. I also took that for kind of the back leg area, but then for the rest of him I kind of decided to take more inspiration from the actual skeletal structure, so the spine area, the rib cage, and also going into like the leg section. For those areas I kind of just did very simplified skeletal anatomy mixed with some mechanical looking parts, and I also included lots of holes and vent systems all over him where he also appears like a little forge or a furnace. That's something that I played around a lot too, like the idea that Azarius might use him to like heat up tools as he's working or forging things. Like he's a companion not just for battle but also for the tinkering itself. So I added heat fence going down his chest and also his back, which gave me more of an opportunity to add those spine looking shapes into his design to kind of match and mirror Azarius a little bit. I think it also just makes him look cool and way more like metal, pardon my pun, because I also wanted this dog to kind of take inspiration from the idea of a hellhound. Tieflings and vampires are full of that like kind of demonic imagery, so I think it would be fun if he had a companion sort of inspired by a hellhound. And once again, to visually merge him with Azarius and also pull him back to that hellhound symbolism, I wanted to give him a flaming mohawk that goes off once in a while whenever he's venting his heat, which I think is cute because it visually looks just a little bit like Azarius's mullet. Because of all of the little sharp edges on him, I did decide to end up calling this little guy Spike. In a perfect world, that would be an acronym for something relating to his function, but I haven't come up with one. If you do, please put it in the comments down below. I think that would be fun. Like I said, I also included a couple of other headshots demonstrating how he would basically breathe fire. Basically how you would see the fire come up his chest and out his mouth, and you would also see the sides of his mouth, his nostrils, and his eyes as like ventilation points basically. And finally on this reference sheet, I thought it would be cute if I included a little diagram in the top right corner showing his cool dog treats that he would receive as not only fuel but also as compensation for being a good little boy. And my partner correctly pointed out to me that these sort of look like poop. So there's that. And with that, here are the finished designs, for now at least. I do think that I want to go in and modify the stuff. As I progress in the campaign, I'm still not completely sold on some of the spine motif concepts that I came up with. I'm specifically looking at you, Spine Spear. And I also just generally think he's gonna become one of the characters that I like drawing on a regular basis. I don't have any tieflings, I don't have any demon boys, and I feel like I kind of skipped my Tumblr sexy man phase, so I think it's about time that I have one of these characters that I start drawing. Maybe it'll convince me to draw masculine characters for a change, we'll see. But I am very, very happy with how his base design came out. I also love his good boy. I really want to draw his good boy now, and I've forced myself to maybe learn how to draw mechanical things a little bit more, so I've really brought an unfortunate fate upon myself there, but we'll see how this goes. Anyways, like I said, if you guys enjoyed this character and concept and just hearing more about my D&D side stuff in general, I can try to make a follow-up video on Azarius a little bit later on once we're a bit deeper into the campaign. Definitely let me know if you would want me to make something like that, because I think it would be a lot of fun to explore this character more once I know a little bit more about him. My previous characters evolved a lot over the course of the campaign, so I'm interested to see how he's going to change organically as I actually play him. It's so different from like how actual OCs evolve evolve because D&D characters have like an actual life to them in a different way. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched till the end of the video. I'm sure that this was another long one, but as always, the biggest thank you for this video and every single one of my videos goes to my patrons and especially my executive producers. Galaxy Stardust 035, Luxabar, my name is A, Miss Furnace, Koichucks, Becca, Niloid Nom, Cyrus Orion, Jenny Craftsma, I Do TKD, Ren, Band Off the Yellow, Cloud Max, Velly Smelly, Stabby Horse, Chihi be on my GBs till I Christina Kimtia Art, Lunira, Fiasco, Mossy Raven, Georgia Run Fair Soon, I'm not saying that name on the internet, ABW Mix, Icecavan, A Wendu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Brian, Phoenix, PNG Not Found, Freedom and Gus Gus, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent Sketchy, Deamaia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and Bean the Bread.